We all know there has been a clear explosion of AI in recent years. While the promise of AI is to automate repetitive tasks and provide incredible cost savings and value to businesses, it's also a huge undertaking for any startup founder. So how can you build out an AI strategy? How can you differentiate yourself with that strategy? What are some lessons and pitfalls that companies have learned from building out an AI product? And do you even need to start incorporating AI into your product roadmap? Those are all great questions that we are going to try to begin to answer for you today. So going in alphabetical order, I'd like to hand the floor over to Jim today to introduce himself and get to know you. So the floor is yours, Jim.
Thank you for the introduction and welcome everybody. So my name is Jim Arnold. I live in Montana. In fact, I've lived here quite a while, although I mostly worked in Silicon Valley, some in Europe and some in Japan. When I started, there really wasn't a tech industry in Montana yet, and that's obviously changed dramatically lately. My first AI project was actually as a child. It didn't work out particularly well. The popular culture at the time had robots everywhere, right? That was magazines, cartoons, what have you. So I mistakenly thought I could just go ahead and build one. It didn't work out. It mostly ran into walls and spun around and so forth, kind of a breakdance thing, burned out its motors. And years later, when I actually worked in AI, I found out that that was pretty much the outcome for most AI work in those days. And really, it didn't change until probably the 1990s. So AI had been around for 40 or 50 years before it had any success, any commercial success. And that was mostly speech recognition in the early days and some targeted advertising. And then something happened, and we sort of feel that today. We're really accelerating now, but it's something really changed out there. 2005, 2010, we saw self-driving cars. DARPA had a grand challenge. Everybody was surprised at how well it worked. The cars could actually drive themselves first through a desert and then through urban areas for tens of miles, hundreds of miles. Watson wins Jeopardy. That was a big deal. If anybody here is old enough to remember some of these things, but Watson was a computer that IBM put together, an algorithm that would be able to read things, newspapers and so forth, and answer questions based on it. And then something I was involved with in the early days was Siri. So that came out in, I guess, Apple made it public in 2011, and it was actually available on their App Store in 2010. And that changed it. I mean, that changed the direction of the industry. It gave it some credibility that you could do things, you could make human-like behaviors in machines. And as you dig down further into it, you realize that there isn't, like any magic trick, there's a way that it can be done without solving the general AI problem, but you can do quite a bit with what's there. So I had a pretty typical career arc. On the technical side, I have electrical engineering degrees from Wisconsin and Stanford. And then I worked primarily in AI and in AI-enhanced user experiences, man-machine interfaces, human-machine interfaces. I was at BBN in Boston, AI lab for a number of years, and I was at Stanford Research Institute for a number of years, jumped in and out from there to startups. They included the Siri, of course, Discern, which was a natural language processing search engine that would be able to read what was on a web page, understand what was there, and then match that against questions. That was eventually purchased by or acquired by Microsoft. EduSpeak, which was teaching English and having a smart verbal interface for practicing on and so forth. I think that was the first of those. There's obviously others out there like Rosetta now. And then other speech packages and dialogue engines for DynaSpeak and for Nuance, which is a company. during that startup phase, when I was working those startups, I was part of a team that developed a process to make this repeatable, and that was pretty interesting. It has some names that we can talk about in the breakout, but it's really iterative, it's open, it creates language for discussing startups. It falls right into a pitch or vice versa. It's a way of manipulating ideas and shaping them into a commercial program. And then later on in the development, you can apply some of the same rules to it to understand whether or not you're still on track for what you hope to do. So in this work, I was, at one time or another, I was a CEO, board member, founder, CTO, and so forth. After this set of startups, and I built a incubator at Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, I moved to venture capital, and because it was convenient, I joined a firm in London. And so for a number of years, I was commuting to London, and which was interesting. About a third of our portfolio involved AI of some sort, or at least it did by the time we were done with it. I mean, one of the things we like to do is look at injecting technology into mid-stage startups that were maybe struggling a little bit, and figure out where the market had gone and what the customers actually wanted. And maybe it was my bias, but I brought in AI quite frequently. And then more recently, I started a consulting business where I work with startups and help them at formation stage and any sort of pivot points in the middle when they have challenges. So de-risking their technical plan or their business plan and positioning in the market and so forth, and looking for new opportunities. So that is me. I'm basically an engineer who pivoted from technology development to business, because it was an interesting way to leverage, all my ambitions of technical. You can only go so far until you get involved in the business side. Obviously, all of you know that too, because you're out there today.
Well, thanks, Jim. Jim has such a fascinating career, and it was so fun to learn about him and to meet him. So I'm just so thrilled that he was able to join us today as well. So moving along, I want to introduce Eric Lofsgarten of Atrium to tell us a little bit about himself and his experience in the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Welcome everybody. Looking forward to getting to visit with y'all a little bit more. So I'm Eric Lofsgarten. I'm based in Bozeman, Montana these days. Originally grew up in Missoula, so Montana native. Although I did take a little break and spent about 15 to 20 years out of state before we were able to come back to the state 10 years ago or so. My background is primarily in IT consulting. So I got hired out of the MBA program in Missoula to go to Anderson Consulting, and really started in the mid-90s implementing technology systems, thinking about and helping companies think about how they're going to start collecting data and information, and rapidly moved from that into the analytics space, where rather than collecting information, how do we leverage the data and the information that we've collected in organizations? Most of my career has been spent working with sales, marketing, customer service organizations, front office applications, and really thinking about the problem of how do I make smarter decisions about my interactions with my customers. Through my career, I spent, I think, 3 years with Anderson, Accenture now. From there, actually started my first consulting company back in the late 90s. A few months before everything was going to crash, Y2K and Alpha YK, anticipation. Not sure that was the brightest time to start a new technology company, but that's what we did. Where it was able to take that company as really the CFO of that organization and also leading our data warehousing practice through an exit in the early 2000s. And then spent some time with the company that bought us, a company named Perficient. They're a public consulting company. And then went to work for one of my customers, went to work for Smucker's Jam and Jelly, running their data warehousing team and working in their IT organization. Went back to school, decided I wanted to get my statistics degree, so went back to Montana State once we were moved to Bozeman, got my statistics degree. And then 4 years ago, started another consulting company focused on those front office organizations again, but really helping them take advantage of a lot of the predictive capability, the AI machine learning capabilities out there today. And for most of our customers, it's the first foray for that part of their organization into this AI and machine learning space. So we've grown Atrium now from the 4 of us that started it exactly 4 years ago up to about 180 folks. I think we did $23 million in business last year. I started as our initial CFO again, have now relinquished that and just run our data science and machine learning practice within Atrium. Really thinking about leveraging data in a way that is provides more consistent decision making and more consistent operations within their front office organizations. In addition to doing my work at Atrium, I love advising and helping startup companies. So I work with 3 different companies right now that are in the startup phase of their operations. Typically meeting with them once or twice a month in an advisory capacity, just helping them top to bottom on the fundamentals of getting an organization started and running a new business, finding their place in the market, building product, fundamental financial operations, and sales and marketing operations within their organizations. So,
awesome.
Yeah, so a little bit of my background, and Jenny, again, kind of back to you and let Taylor introduce himself.
Okay, thanks so much, Eric. Yeah, Eric has been a longtime friend and trusted mentor and advisor, and has just been so generous with his time. We're just so appreciative of all the time that you spend with our startup founders. So thanks for that. So last but not least is Taylor McCaslin coming to us from Big Sky. So Taylor, do you want to introduce yourself to the folks here today?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Taylor McCaslin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a multidisciplinary product manager. I'm an angel investor now living in Big Sky. I actually moved here about a year ago. I'm really trying to change the pace of my life, slow down a little after a decade in the startup scene. Have loved Montana. Glad to finally being plugged into the startup scene here. In terms of my day job, I'm a principal product manager at GitLab. We're one of the first fully remote public companies. I'm focused on data science and cybersecurity. I also do run a small angel investment fund focused on impact investing for companies that build ethical and responsible products. I particularly focus on underestimated and first-time founders and help them secure their first checks. I also help my companies build secure products that people trust with a focus on privacy and inclusion. My portfolio, I've been excited to have 2 acquisitions and make over 150 investments since 2019. In terms of AI and ML, that is kind of what I've been doing for the past 5 years, helping product companies and my own companies integrate machine learning into products. I'm doing that responsibly and ethically. Also, being very pragmatic about it. Do we actually need machine learning for this? The answer is surprisingly no, most of the time. And you can save yourself a lot of heartache and money if you can decide that a lot earlier on. So yeah, I mean, I'm a career product manager, so I'm really focused on building those products and doing it in a pragmatic way. So yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Taylor. So what we are going to do today is I am going to set up 3 breakout rooms. It is going to be kind of a choose your own adventure. So Jim Arnold will be room 1 and Taylor McCaslin will be in room 3.
To start this out, I guess we're going to have some questions. I'm curious if there's a moment here, if anyone would like to share their interest in AI or what sort of stuff is going on in your startup that makes you want to peek at this. I think
I guess I can kick things off with, so we're mostly using AI for predictive analysis for appliances.
like predictive maintenance or
Yeah, predictive maintenance.
Condition-based maintenance sort of things.
Yeah. So what we're actually doing is we're building a high efficiency water heater and then building AI directly into that for predicting failure and then running that through a subscription based. And so we make it so our AI acts as a forever warranty through the subscription. So we're kind of struggling between, the hardware components of leveraging that and the software components of it and putting it all together.
Yeah, I worked with a company in Britain just a couple of years ago that was doing the almost exact same business model for windmills for green energy. And what they could offer an extended warranty when they came off of the OEM's warranty. They could extend that by putting their own analytics on board and having a price that would cover. In their industry, at least, failure was very expensive. If they could fix it in advance of an actual destructive failure in the gearbox, they could save a lot of money. And so, do you have a value proposition sort of like that here, or what's the end user see?
Yes, so the end user part is really just instead of, most warranties only cover so many years in certain parts. And so we just have it to where with using the prediction of failure, we just swap out the old water heater and put ours in, and we take the old one back, refurbish it, put it back out in the market.
So so I think this makes a lot of sense. Probably we'll see that in a lot of appliances and so forth. But what's the barrier now to your success? What's the issue?
No, a lot of it is connecting the hardware part with the software part. So there's a lot of IoT plug and play systems out there. I've even seen dedicated hardware for AI and predicting maintenance and failure and so forth. So I guess there's really too many options, and so it's just kind of needing to pick one, right, that's going to work the best.
So I think this is a follow-on conversation. There's a company in let's leave it at this, in Boston, who's doing analytics on your power consumption in a home. And what they're doing is they learn what various appliances sound like, as it were, in the noise they create on the power line. And they know then how much power is getting used and when these devices are on and so forth. And they're, I think they're Bluetoothing into a box in the home that then goes to a cloud with home internet. And they do everything in the cloud. So is that kind of where you're at? Or?
Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar with it on kind of where we're at. Yeah, okay. I think it'd be good, maybe a good follow on, after this to talk a little bit more if you're okay with that. So I'll let some other people discuss what they're doing as well.
Yeah, what you're doing is important, and there's a few other folks that have been out there in front of it a little bit for a couple of years, and we can learn from their lessons a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's our next topic? Do we have any other questions at this point?
I'll throw out another one out there. So,
sure.
So there's a company and they're using a chip base, and they're reading the kind of similar to what you're mentioning. They're reading the electrical signals coming through the line, and then they can predict out if that electric signal has a spike or not. Then they can figure out what parts are about to fail and predict that out. But it seems like the hardware component is a little more expensive than just saying running it straight software. And this kind of has the software based and hardware based approach. But would you say that just running machine learning through a software based approach is better than having that hardware component? As
little hardware as you can get away with is always best. It's more to go wrong in the software you can easily upgrade as opposed to hardware that's in a remote site. I think this is a good conversation to have. I think we should follow up on this. I find it interesting, and I think there's a lot to be done there. So for the group at large here, are you currently considering AI in your product, or are you just sort of trying to make sure, fear of missing out, I guess, FOMO? Or where are you at in your decision process?
I'll go. My name is Ken Fickler. I'm the founder of Gaze. We're building a real-time cannabis impairment test using AI. We're currently building, we're actually currently capturing data, and then we'll use that to train our machine learning model, which will predict the experienced impairment of a user based on eye movement.
That's very cool. So Jenny actually mentioned that you were doing that in Helena. So
I'm in Missoula, actually.
Oh, you're in Missoula now. Okay,
Yeah.
You were part of the administration, so I guess you probably lived in.
I was, yep. So I was in Helena for a number of years, and now I'm in Missoula.
Yeah. And is your product, what's the stage of development?
We've sort of separated into two phases. The first is an evidence collection product, and that's currently for sale. It's in testing with a number of departments. And then phase two will be using machine learning to understand impairment based on eye movement data collected in the field. And that's the portion we're building now. I anticipate we'll be releasing that in 6 months or so. We just wrapped up a capital raise.
Very good. And so what are the risks that you're trying to take out at this point? Is it have you been able to demonstrate that eye gaze has a signal to it that
yes yeah the biggest risk I would say that we have in front of us right now is that the signal that we're getting doesn't translate into the accuracy we expect. We really need to be greater than human level accuracy, which I believe will be easy to achieve, but the biggest risk is that we don't hit that metric. I've hired a contract research organization in Canada to collect a large amount of clinical data for us, and we'll use that to train our model. And so I guess the biggest risk we're facing right now and trying to de-risk would be probably not having enough data points to build a model with the accuracy we need.
Tell us about data.
So the data, we're building a cannabis impairment product. So basically the data will be capturing a baseline measurement using our product, and then several measurements over the course of a high. So we'll actually be getting people high throughout the course of the study. The objective here is to really understand with much greater nuance than has ever been had before what the eye movement, how eye movement changes over
So I'm losing you, Ken. Do others hear Ken okay? Or oh, are you back? Your audio is gone. We see there's still room in the video conference business. It's still not done yet. if it makes anyone feel better, I had to reboot to get my video to work before the meeting. So we can probably start with reinventing the computer too. Ken, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can't. We can't see, but that's.
I think my camera keeps crashing. I just had to reboot it again.
It's more important to hear you than see you, I think, at this point. Yeah.
There's plenty of space in the video conferencing business still.
Yeah, so okay, so it sounds like you're all over this. And then what does your go-to-market look like once you've proven out a prototype?
We've got a number of police departments that have agreed to be beta customers for us. And so we'll deploy with them initially, prove that it works, and then do a really mass market push. There's another side to this business, and that's putting this into a commercial business with safety or security critical employees. And we've got a number of those businesses as well that have agreed to come on as beta customers. And so we'll deploy with them simultaneously and make sure it works in a commercial setting as well.
Well, right, it's legal in how many states now? Almost half, third?
We got medical legalization in 38 states, and 19 states have recreational legalization.
Yeah, including some big ones like New York and California. So population-wise, is probably over half the country.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, interesting business. Do you have what's your channel? Are you going to sell direct?
We'll sell direct, at least initially. I want to stay really close to the customers and, make sure that the product is working for them as built. And, I think there's a lot of advantages we can get in that route, including much better margins. There's obviously lots of resellers that go into police as well, but I don't anticipate using those, at least in the short term.
That's interesting work. So if this is kind of in my wheelhouse, sort of sensing an AI. So if there's follow on to this, feel free to reach out.
I would love to chat in more detail.
That sounds really good.
And Ken, so this is John Mack. I'm in Great Falls. I was a detective with the Great Falls Police Department, and am currently a cold case homicide investigator volunteer with the Cascade County Sheriff's Office. So if you need introductions, if you haven't already, I can introduce you to whoever. And I know a bunch of drug recognition instructors and all sorts of stuff. So
I'd love to chat. Would you drop your email in the chat?
Yep, will do.
Thanks.
So John, what's your story here?
So started a full stack web application for Montana tourism, not involving any sort of machine learning or AI at this point. But in working with, I think we have a crime problem in the world, and I think there's AI could benefit it. And so when I was working on my master's degree in criminal justice, I really like the analytics side of predictive crime analysis and CompStat that New York City, implemented back in the 80s to drive their crime down. And working on these cold case homicides, I am not unconvinced that if given a big enough training set, that you could predict with a high degree of certainty who, let's say, a murderer is in a particular crime. And so it's just something I'm thinking about, tools that could help detectives, kind of level up and do better using, kind of neural network sort of stuff. So it's just it's not my day job. It's just something I've been thinking about because I'm close to it. So that's why I'm here, to kind of hear what other people are doing, see if it lights a fire and gets me inspired.
So what data would you have available to you to build these models primarily?
Yeah, so right now, with my affiliation with both the police department and our local sheriff's office, I have, all the records, hundreds of pages of officers' reports for, actual homicides, obviously the outcomes in court, basically everything related to the crimes that we've investigated here in Cascade County, Montana, going back as long as we have records for. But haven't done anything with it yet, other than thinking about it. I would need a bigger data set than that, and a lot of challenges to overcome.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting vision. And it seems like the right time to do it. I mean, the tools are so much better than they were just a few years ago.
Yep.
And they're available to anyone now.
Right.
Yeah, the AI model has gone into these horizontal layers, right? Before it was like you had a genius company that built it from scratch all the way up. And now we have OpenAI and others who have tools that are available to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. But these law enforcement markets are, you know, at the local level here, the technology is just so far behind what, you know, the commercial world has, just because of bureaucracy and money and funding. And it's just, I'm blown away at how slow to adapt all these record systems are. You know, for example, they're just not doing it as good as they could. So anyways, lots of ideas in that space. But
You know, I try to sell to local, state level, and I had a similar problem. At the time, it was situation awareness and collaboration of field workers, you know, remote workers and so forth. And I saw all that too. And what I think helped was to narrow down what I was trying to do, narrow the focus, and find one really important thing that was just going to work out, because everybody wanted it, the data was there, whatever. I guess maybe that's, you're already on that, but that's just my response to it. It's hard to sell local. Yeah. They don't have an IT department. Yeah. Who haven't we heard from yet? So we have Beth and Christy. Are we here?
I can go. My name's Beth. I live in Bozeman. I work for a company called Ionic. So any web devs out there probably know us for our open source platform for creating cross-platform apps. I work on our cloud services team, and this year we are launching an enterprise app platform, meaning we're pulling in all of our different features and products into a single platform or dashboard so that we can A, build out a self-service model, and then B, further sell into enterprises and standardize our platform across multiple business units. So big project, we have a lot of data, but we don't use predictive analytics or AI. And so we're at the very beginning of this big project, and I'm just kind of curious of like, where do we start?
What are the things that you would like to accomplish with it?
I'd like to provide personalized experiences to the users based on features they're using or how they come into our dashboard, implement churn indicators, identify room for growth. So really focus on the like personalization aspect, as well as identify, you know, customers that might be likely to purchase our different features or products. So trying to use AI to predict the whales, I guess, for those mobile gamers out there. But yeah, who's our whales, and like, how do we know who they are? How do we predict
What do they want?
who they are, and then message them at the right time, I guess, or provide them the right content.
You shouldn't have to invent too much of this. You know, instrumenting websites and application workflows and so forth, are tools for that are out there. Probably more or less complete solutions that nobody's happy with are out there. I think that's an interesting area. And the good news is I don't think you'll have to build so much yourself. Did you want to build a custom unique application because you have a little different market?
I'm not sure, honestly. We have the talent probably internally to do it, but you know, outsourcing it because it's not our bread and butter would probably be the way to go. So
or platforms that are available from AWS or other.
Okay, sorry all to cut you off like that. I just bounced around between rooms, and it sounds like there were some awesome conversations. So I'm just gonna give you all a chance to join another group if you'd like, or stay in that same breakout. But I'll start those right now, and you're welcome to choose. Jim again will be in room 1, Eric room 2, and Taylor in room 3. See you guys back here. Have fun.
Hey, Jenny,
Yeah.
I might have to update Zoom or something. I'm still getting a blank like modal for breakout room.
Okay. Where do you want to go?
Number 3 again, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Let's see, where are you? Okay. There you go.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, we're back. And I'm learning how to unmute my screen again. You think by now I'd know how to do that? So the basics, get down, we're talking about AI and stuff, and I have to learn to unmute my screen. So good to meet everybody. Do we have a topic or question that somebody has about discussion today? Anyone?
I can pose a question here.
Okay.
I asked this of in the other breakout room as well. My name's Josh. I work for a company called Black Hive. We're doing construction scheduling software.
That's very cool, by the way. I saw that in the early stage website, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Come across it, yeah.
Thank you. So we do a lot of stuff like we build a schedule for these companies automatically based on some set of data inputs that they give us. But we do it all with, a lot of if-then statements and for loops.
Expert system, rule-based.
Yeah.
That's
so
what it is. Yeah.
We get a lot of kind of pushback almost where if we try to say automatically produce schedule, people don't get it. But if we say AI powered schedule, it hits and they understand it. But we're not technically using any AI.
So the rule-based stuff is AI.
Okay, so that's my question then, is like, what is the threshold to say that you're using AI? And
well, trust me, with AI and like market thresholds, it is pretty low. There's 2 or 3 branches of AI. There was the neural net stuff, which was in the 50s. It was disgraced in the 70s. It came back, in the 90s or 2000s, and it's huge now because they figured out how to do it right. In the 80s, there was a symbolic manipulation stuff, which is kind of what you're doing, which is if then else is one form of it. And that was the main thrust of AI until about 1990. And there are a lot of workflow systems out there that still work that way. So back office productivity systems, a lot of those are still doing something like that. So I thought you were going to go the other way, which is, would you benefit from doing something more statistical?
That's a great question too. I think yes, and we see applications for where we could start to input some data science applications, and we just we're too new, right? We're not there, and we're trying to kind of sell them the value propositions that we have now, as opposed to.
Don't break what you've got to add technology. I think all the other 2 said the same thing. Yeah. If you're making progress, but maybe think about instrumenting what you're doing now so that you have the data to do more later, retrospectively.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably centers somewhere around what's the success of your schedules now, and putting together a learning algorithm that comes up with alternatives based on experience, which is what a person would do. It's like, where are the risks in the schedule, and where do you want to pad it, and which order of events tends to work out better, and so forth. Let that stuff emerge from experience instead of program it in with an expert system, at least eventually. And that, I think, that gives you some headroom to grow too. So when competitors come out there with their own rule-based stuff, you can leapfrog them back with, you've got a couple years head start on them in terms of analytics. And you get more serious about it. And you'll regret if you don't have the data. So with the theory of minimizing future regret, think about what the metrics would be that you would like to collect and on that. Yeah, that's very good.
Thank you.
Archive. It's a great little company there.
Appreciate it.
Who's next? I'll make this into an interrogation. I could ask questions too.
I've got something that might be worth bringing up.
Sure.
So I'm a head of data science at a company called Submittable in Missoula. We're a grant management platform, but I've found myself doing a lot of product lately. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that in the data science world, we do a lot of like kind of art of the possible, and we essentially kind of invert the typical like product discovery methods, right? We know what's possible, and then we try to figure out how do we apply it to go and solve problems that people actually have.
Tech
rather
push,
than,
we call that.
right?
Yeah.
So I guess I've been struggling with this a little bit, and so I'd love it if you've got any kind of, even that term I think is going to be useful to me for research purposes. But like understanding a little bit better about how to do this better, because it so often is kind of this. It feels like this inverse problem, which are always kind of nasty problems to solve, right?
So, in terms of tech push versus demand pull,
how do you do? Yeah, how do you do like tech push well, I guess, is kind of the question that I've got. Like, how do you go and come up with these solutions, right? The people don't even know that they want.
Right, Steve Jobs is famous for that. He said, don't ask the end user, they don't know what they want. They'll give you the focus group answers, which are things they've heard from somebody else already. What you really want to do is look in, I mean, I'm not Steve Jobs, but I'll try to channel him momentarily. It's like, what is the problem they're actually trying to solve? And that they may not even recognize yet, but it would be very important to them. And then solve that. And, as long as what you're doing aligns with a hypothesis of what they really need, you're going to be, it'll be time well spent. I think trying to take existing product and add a lot of technology. Experimentation is valuable for that, piloting. But tech push was always a problem. I mean, for my world, I spent a lot of time in AI research labs, and everything looked like a nail.
Yeah.
We had the ultimate hammer, and everything was our nail. And it really, how do you answer this? As long as you're focused on a customer problem, whether or not they understand it, and you can make an argument for value, real value, game-changing value for them, it's okay. I mean, sometimes it's like a step change, means somebody comes in and does something so dramatically different that none of the end users would have agreed to it, even if you asked them. And so you have to ask yourself, is the payoff big enough to make that big risk? Because it is a risky endeavor. You spend a lot of time building something, you can push away your current customers because you have these baffling new features, or you can't explain it, and there's a lot of issues on that. I don't know. I wouldn't mind talking about that again if you had time in the future, and after I think about it a little bit too. There's been a lot of work on it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. It's a a pretty pressing problem that I've got, and kind of
Yeah,
how
that's
we're kind of
interesting.
trying to come up with things.
Yeah, how to know when it's right, how to make an incremental plan that allows for major steps.
Yeah. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot, though.
Yeah, well, thank you. I wish, yeah, wish you well. We'll talk. You have my email, I think, or
I think, or I can find you on LinkedIn or
yeah,
something.
or something. Yeah, Jenny would have it. So I don't know if we have a couple more minutes here. If somebody wants to talk about something in their business.
I mean, I can just ask more questions about my problems.
But are you? I don't know how much you follow the AI world. There's a couple of areas that are kind of interesting for new companies. You know, as AI gets more broadly deployed, it's going to bump into some things. It's like when it was very narrow, and especially when it was doing things for industrial automation or something, it was hard to do too much damage. But now we're doing more with social impact, and there's issues in AI like bias. You've probably heard about that. And it's just a case of not that the machines are evil, but the data we feed it is typically biased. You know, it's from
a huge problem with philanthropy.
Yeah, that it is. And so everything starts to look like whatever you fit in. And there's services and there's tools that are emerging for dealing with that. But that's a problem out there. I don't, there's a related area, which is also important, called explainable AI. Now, if that term comes up ever, maybe it does in philanthropy.
Not in philanthropy, but or like not specifically philanthropy related, but in general, explainable AI is always something that people want, I think, more than is sometimes givable.
Eric Lofsgarten will be in room 2.
Do you guys want to just go ahead and give a quick introduction to yourself? I'd love to hear a little bit about you and a little bit about your companies, and of course what's interesting to you. So
hey,
Andrew,
Eric,
go ahead, Nick.
Sure. My name is Nick Rogers. I'm with Aliens from the Future. We're based out of Missoula. I'm in Duluth, Minnesota myself, but the rest of my team is in Missoula. One of the major projects that we're working on right now is using data ontological concepts to interface with artificial intelligence. It's kind of a modeling tool for artificial intelligence. So just excited to see what you have to say today.
Awesome. Andrew, want to give a quick intro?
Sure. I'm the head of data science at Submittable. It's a submission grant management company in Missoula. I'm actually not in Montana. I'm in Boulder, but I work for them, and our CMO kind of pointed me towards this, and I decided to show up and see what was going on. But I'll be honest, I'm a little bit just kind of here to be a fly on the wall more than a super active participant.
Awesome. And Jason, maybe quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eric. A lot like Andrew, I am CEO of a co-working space based out of Helena. We're right now actively expanding through the state. We got a location in Bozeman, Missoula, and have about a dozen more that will be opening up over the next 3 years. So my intent on jumping on here, I know Jenny really well, so just trying to see what resources and information that we can go ahead and pass out to the startups we have, calling our space home, so that we can send more resources their way as they're building their businesses. So
very cool. So yeah, what kind of questions can I start tackling for you guys? Would love to do a little bit of a Q&A and keep this as interactive as we can. So Go ahead if you guys have questions, just ask away. Otherwise, I can dig in a little bit more and talk just what we're seeing out in the market, but would love to start with questions.
I'd love to hear actually more about kind of the market that you're seeing. But I'll let Jason, if he's got actually something more focused.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of along the lines of my question, and also wondering, when we're having startups come through our space who are building their organizations and their products, a lot of folks aren't thinking of AI, and so I'm curious, like, what are you seeing more and more of as far as gaps where entrepreneurs and owners are just not looking at an option of AI to integrate into their business?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what I'm seeing today, and especially working with sales, marketing, customer service organizations, they tend to be a little bit slower adopters of technology. What we're seeing right now in most of the organizations that we work with they know they need to use the technology. There's so much hype in the market around data science, machine learning, that they come to us and say, we know we need to do this to be competitive. Can you tell us what it is? And really starting at that level of education. And when I think about that, then from a technology firm, right, you can't just have a black box machine learning AI product that you sell. It's really an educational sell in that space, where you have to teach them what it is, what the limitations are, and what it can do for their organization before they're even able to engage in real conversations about purchasing technology or purchasing models. So it's from our business, it means that our sales cycles are actually quite a bit longer than a traditional sales cycle, because there is that education process that we have to start with. I think the other thing that we deal with a lot is overcoming really this fear of the technology, right? The first question, does that mean I'm going to lose my job? And that's almost never the case. It's actually provides more and more opportunities, but you have to help them overcome the fears of the technology first. And a lot of times that means not just implementing the advanced analytics solutions, but also explaining what it's doing, why it is making the recommendations or decisions that it's making, so that you can alleviate a lot of that fear of the technology itself.
Do you run into a lot of questions over bias, or is that kind of more of a philanthropy problem?
Yeah, super interesting question. I run into the opposite problem, where folks aren't concerned about it, and they should be.
That makes sense.
We put together a model recently where an organization wanted to identify employees that they were at risk of losing. And right now you're talking about HR topics, you're talking about employee evaluation, and they literally did not care if we checked demographic status, gender, economic status of the employees. And I'm like, I can't reasonably build a model with you without a lot of those bias checks and those bias protections in place. And fascinating that they just didn't care. And I think that's more the norm than the folks that have the ethical concerns about the AI and the technology.
In the philanthropic space, the opposite is actually true. They're so scared of the bias. They're so scared of that they won't engage with kind of these AI tools because it's just like they're afraid that they're going to go and have all these bias problems and things like that. And they frequently go and kind of ignore the fact that they're human bias. Like there's human bias too that you have to worry about, that humans are biased and have all these other issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you build models based on historical data, right? That bias is reflected in the data, and you have to be super careful about it.
Yeah.
But there are ways that you can test, and there are ways you can protect against it. And for us, we're super cognizant of that as we develop technology for companies. But oftentimes we have to force that protections onto our customers rather than them asking about it and trying to make sure that we're building models that are ethically safe for them. So yeah, super interesting topic for sure. What other thoughts or questions do you guys have? For me, and I think Taylor made this comment in his introduction, a lot of times the technology, the AI, machine learning, data science technologies are things that are the first choice for customers and probably should be the last choice for customers, right? A lot of times they're using the technology to answer a question that a simple analytics report could answer, or simple data visualization could answer, or simple business process engineering can tackle. And I think that's one of the huge challenges that I see in the market right now, where companies think that AI machine learning solves a lot of problems that it doesn't necessarily solve. And we have to be really targeted and really focused on where we apply the technology to what's going on in the business. And so that's kind of that opposite end of the spectrum, from being afraid of the technology to having really unrealistic expectations of the technology itself. And so it's finding that balance in between them.
Eric, you've obviously seen a lot in your career. Can you talk a little bit about some novel uses of things like machine learning and natural language programming that you've seen, maybe even recently?
Yeah, I think the adoption in the business world is just starting. I think the applications of the technology in that space, right? I work with a lot of low-tech companies, right? Making jam and jelly, phone companies, banks, a lot of those types of companies. Where I think it's really interesting and really challenging is having them think about novel applications of maybe even not overly sophisticated technologies in their industry. A perfect example that I'd like to talk about is, what if we took our typical car buying experience and put AI machine learning technology at the center of that? Rather than, right, us walking into a dealer, what if the dealer looked at my buying patterns, knew where I was at in my stage of life, right? My kids are just getting ready to graduate from high school. I probably don't need that minivan anymore. Came to me with, the little sportier car that's, for a retirement age type of person that maybe I'd be interested in, and proactively reached out to me rather than me having to walk into a dealer. Right. I think there's really creative applications of this predictive capability that comes with AI machine learning that can completely flip the way companies do business. And so it's really helping them think outside the box. we actually are working with a company that makes airline parts for both Boeing and Airbus airplanes. They make hydraulics and EMCU, basically control units for airplanes. And working with them on doing some predictive parts failure type modeling, right? When a plane sits at a gate and has a service delay, it costs the airline somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 an hour to have that plane sitting on the ground. If we can better predict when a part is going to fail rather than waiting to their routine maintenance window or waiting till they have a on the ground situation, it saves them tens of millions of dollars a year. And so we're putting together some models around that that are self-learning adaptive models to really better predict problems like that so they can do preventative maintenance during the overnight out of service window rather than with an out of on the ground situation. So I think those are where the technology gets really interesting, Nick, and it's without really even super innovative technology, right? Those are models that have been around forever, but now we have the data and the computational capability to implement them in more real-time scenarios.
That's great. Thanks for answering my question.
You bet.
To kind of flip that actually on its head, is there any area that you kind of are seeing as like coming up on a tipping, or any technology, I should say, that is coming up on kind of a tipping point? I mean, Siri was pretty brand new for what it was, right? It was really early on in that speech recognition and kind of artificial conversation space. So kind of what's next, or what's coming up that's kind of enabling technologies that you think are just kind of on the cusp right now?
Yeah, I think one of the technologies that we're really excited about is a lot of the reinforcement learning technology. It's actually the technology that Google used with AlphaGo, but it's technology that I think is still not easily applied to a lot of problems. Probably the biggest question that we get asked from our customer organizations is, what can I do to help my sales team know what the next best call they should make with their customers? What is that next best action? And I think, and we've been working a lot on how do we apply reinforcement learning? So how do we leverage all of this years of experience that their entire sales organization has to better interact with their customers through reinforcement learning type of technologies, where it's adaptive, it's changing with their business, where we can really automate the recommendation of what's the next best phone call that they could make with, the 50 or 100 customers that they manage in their individual portfolios. I think that's super valuable. I also think a lot of that, the bot technology and a little bit more personal interaction, right? Right now, From Bozeman is one of the companies that really was one of the early entries into that market. And I think, right, we all still hate interacting with those chatbots online. They're not very personal yet. They're not great yet. I think we're going to see tremendous innovation in that space in the next 5 years. So those are probably the two.
These reinforcement learning and chatbots.
Yeah.
For reinforcement learning, the biggest problem that I've always, and I don't follow this space very, very well, but or very closely, but the biggest problem that I always understood was the data problem of the fact that they're incredibly data hungry, these reinforcement learning algorithms. They want, thousands and thousands of examples, and, human experience is not quite that rich with examples. do you have some techniques that you're kind of using to kind of get around that, or are you guys doing, or is that still kind of a research area?
Yeah, we definitely look at areas of the business that have those data volumes. So we work with a staffing organization, a big staffing company. They have 200 million customer interactions they've tracked in their system. So now I have a data set that's big enough to try to leverage. I look at a lot of customer service organizations where they do high volume call center traffic. That again, I have enough data volume. And I think that's, companies now have had these applications in place for 8 or 10 years. We're starting to get to a lot of companies having enough data volume that is reasonable to think about these applications. There's still certainly huge challenges in the data quality, and how much of those 200 million records are really actually usable is definitely still a real problem.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you bet. All right, looks like we get to head back. But
Okay, sorry all to to cut you off like that. I just bounced around between rooms and it sounds like there were some awesome conversations. So I'm just gonna give you all a chance to join another group if you'd like, or stay in that same breakout. But I'll start those right now, and you're welcome to choose. Jim again will be in room 1, Eric room 2, and Taylor in room 3. See you guys back here. Have fun.
welcome everybody. I would love to start out just kind of getting a quick intro from each of you, and maybe I'll call names in order. Would love to hear kind of what your company is in 10 words, 15 words, and then kind of where your interest areas are, and then we can go from there. I want to try to keep this as interactive as we can, and love to make it mostly a Q&A session if we can. So Elaine, you're the first one that shows up on my radar screen, so maybe we'll start with you.
I am a product design manager at Polaris, the power sports company. I'm mostly just looking to see what all people are working on and what's going on in the community. No specific questions.
Great.
For my work.
Perfect. Lee, I see you second.
Hi, thanks for participating and being a mentor today. This is a really exciting opportunity. My name is Lee Cook. I'm a co-founder of a company based out of Bozeman, Montana called Tadpole. We do e-commerce software, and so helping like mid-market companies compete in the competitive online world. And so our team is comprised of data. We have a few data scientists, some software engineers, and a lot of digital marketing analysts. And so that's kind of our focus area. And so I'm interested to ask some questions around basically how you look at data visualization and data integrity checks, but I will table that until the question time comes.
That sounds perfect. John, I see you next. All right, I'll come back to you, John. How about Gordon next?
Hey, yeah, I'm with Tory Industries, one of the co-founders, and we're building a high-efficiency, low upfront cost, and environmentally sustainable water heater. And we're implementing AI for prediction failure and running that through a subscription so that the subscription acts as a forever warranty. And if we predict that your water heater is about to go out, we simply just come swap out the unit, bring the old one back, refurbish it, put it back out into the market.
Very cool. I work with a company that does airline parts, and we put together some part prediction failure models for them as well. So pretty cool use case. Yeah. Craig, I see you next. Christy, you want to give a quick intro?
Hi, I'm the president of Montana West Economic Development up in Kalispell. So I'm more of a voyeur in these conversations just to get an idea of what's going on, especially as we have a growing tech sector up here in the Northwest corner.
Awesome. Norm, quick intro.
Sure. I am an investment advisor showing up late. I got totally lost in doing some work that had a deadline, and I completely forgot. I was so excited. I'm an investment advisor in technology startups, and one of the companies in our portfolio called Wallaroo AI works a lot with shortening development cycles to get AI and ML projects live and in market.
Very, very cool. Huge challenge. And I know a lot of the industry stats are there. It's somewhere between 70 and 80% of those projects never make it to production. So that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Right.
Craig or John, anybody else that I missed?
Sorry about that, Eric. This is Craig Stallberg. I'm a CPA who's been in Missoula for I graduated in '86. That's the easiest way. Let people do the math. And I went back for a grad program in business analytics. So I'm really just kind of looking to see from a analytics perspective, what are the real opportunities that are happening in Montana?
Very cool. Back in my area, I graduated from Sentinel in '90, I think. All right, anybody else that I missed?
Yeah, Eric, I'm John. I'm a software engineer, and I'm just listening in out of interest. I don't have anything in particular, but I'm always interested in hearing what people are working on. So.
Awesome, great. Well, it's great to visit with all of you, and love having these conversations. So maybe we'll just open up the floor for questions. You know, there were a couple of folks that had questions out there, so let's go ahead and just start tackling any questions. Go ahead, Lee. I see you raised your hand.
Hi, let's see. I just am curious, I think, with Atrium, I guess, how you guys think about when you guys are working with your clients and looking at, checking the data integrity, making sure everything's correct, and then moving your clients to action based on those insights that you guys are surfacing. Just curious, kind of what that experience has been like, if any, pitfalls, things, just, kind of some general comments in that arena.
Yeah, I think for us, probably 80% of the work that we do in this space is on the data. Getting the data ready, cleaned, verifying it is the majority of our time. We work with data that is often keyed in by sales professionals. Company maybe has 1,000 people in their sales organization. They all are keying in data, and certainly not very consistently. They don't get paid dinner data, right? They get paid to sell. And so we have to really think about the quality of the data and the impacts that data is going to have on both the analytics and the predictive models. We tend to do a lot of iteration on clean, validate, look at that data from a predictive and a production perspective, and really verify that the output of the models and the output of the analytics align with the expectations of the customer. And between the detailed code testing and then the user testing on those visualizations, that's where almost the entirety of the project is. I tell everybody the modeling piece is easy once the data is good. Right. Other questions?
Yeah, how about I wanted to know your opinion on a hardware versus software approach to machine learning. So I guess in particular to our approach, there's some hardware that detects pattern recognition in electrical signals versus just reading, data coming from sensors. And kind of the approach for that. You have a weight on what's better versus the other.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of opinion on which is better. I actually think the two working in combination is really important. With the airline company that I was referring to, they make hydraulic spoilers for airplanes and then electrical control units. We actually help them both on the software side, but also on the hardware side, and thinking about failure detection, both from a sensor mechanism and interpreting sensors and interpreting then patterns in sensors over time to better understand what are those signals prior to complete failure of that part. But we also help them on the hardware side and making sure that they're implementing technology within their hydraulics that provide reasonable signals and reasonable failure modes before or in conjunction with the sensors themselves. So I think that the two of those working together and designing that from the beginning is really important. With them, it's fascinating that they actually end up building a lot of redundancy in their parts. And one of the biggest challenges they've had now is because we have the redundancy built internal in the mechanism, they actually want to know when one part of that redundancy chain has failed, even though the part itself has not, so that they can better anticipate when the whole part is going to fail. Fascinating problem. It actually is probably caused them more problems having that redundancy built in than not having the redundancy in the first place, because of that detection of a part that's still working normally but has now lost its redundant capability.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Not an either or, but a both. Okay,
yeah,
it's good to think about. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we work a lot actually with their customer airlines. So the maintenance practices, a lot of those not even integrated system components end up playing a large part in our predictive models. Or for example, airlines that take off from SFO and aspirate salt water have a different failure rate than maybe somebody that's only departing Denver to Kansas City, right? And are not aspirating that salt water ever. So really interesting that we think about not only data from the part itself, but environmental factors and airline route factors that contribute as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. With ours, we're kind of looking at sensors that can read quality of water, and what minerals are in it and so forth. That way we can better predict out when an element might fail and so forth as well, dependent upon area and locations. So
yep.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you learned a lot. It sounded to me as I bounced around from room to room like there were, a wide array of questions, but all kinds of knowledge. It was just amazing to listen to some of the conversations and how quickly and kind of the deep level of intimacy and understanding that these guys have around AI and basically building and growing a startup. So it's just fun to be a fly on the wall and listen in.